But the reality is that Zoran Mamdani, at the very least, I think also lifted the tides in other races across the country. This is my argument. An 80% Latino city, 50-point swing to Cheryl from what Kamala Harris did. So just to say, like,
she's saying that's because of Mamdani? Like, Emma, do you think there's any other reason why Hispanic voters would have dramatically moved away from Trump?
Now, my viewpoint is that Zoran is really the first to do that, where he talked about, do you believe Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state? He says, I believe it has the right to exist as a state of equal rights. That is my position. I think more Democrats should be speaking in that fashion, meaning one democratic state.
This proposition is the least popular proposition amongst both Palestinians and Israelis. That is very clear in the when you dive into the numbers. Why are you, as like a Western leftist, so insistent on that outcome? Lovett had a conversation with Emma Vigeland. See how this goes.
Hey everybody, joining me today, it's Emma Vigeland from The Majority Report. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. The studio is so lovely.
There is so much to get through. We came out of a shutdown. Democrats were in disarray. Feels like another lifetime as the Epstein scandal has reemerged with a vengeance. Let's start with that. So we learned today that Republicans expect there to be mass defections on the discharge petition. This was what Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie introduced. They were scrounging their way to get to a majority, to get just a few Republicans to join. Mike Johnson refused to seat a new member of Congress because she was going to be the vote that took it over the top. Now they're going to bring it to the floor. It looks like as many as 100 Republicans could join. Trump sure is acting like someone who is worried about this. He's trying to buttonhole a bunch of members into opposing it. Doesn't seem to be working.
You say she is not our ally. So I have kind of I have thoughts about Emma Vigeland. I find myself irritated with her more and more these days. But the fact of the matter is, when the rubber hit the road in 2024, because I went back and I looked, she was pushing for Kamala. Not, she wasn't like a K-Hive member. She was, I wouldn't call her a Kamala enthusiast, but she was pretty unambiguously pushing for Kamala. There were a couple posts where she would say stuff like, kind of framing it as a lesser of two evils, which I think is problematic. I really don't like when people do that. Like when I look at the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, it's like the difference between, a soft newborn puppy and like a child molester. Or when I think about like the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, I think of like a really good like stretch when you wake up in the morning, like a really just solid stretch, and like a stroke. That's how I look at the parties. And so whenever somebody says, harm reduction and just got to vote for the lesser of two evils, I just don't like the framing, because it's not that the Democrats never do anything that's harmful, but when we're having a conversation about the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, it's like free rabbits for everybody. Just like somebody just shows up at your door and gives you a rabbit versus just getting like white phosphorus released in your neighborhood. What is this, headless chicken? Hello there. You should vote for me. No, you should vote for me. I will improve your quality of life. I'll eat your kids to death. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's a good meme. I got to save this one. This is good. I've never seen this. This is like, thank you for this, by the way. I feel so seen with this meme. But anyways, like Emma was, she was even kind of on that hopium kick too, man. Because I saw some people give me shit for my election prediction in 2024, and that's fair. But like when you look at her prediction, we had the same thought process. Okay, this was her election prediction. Pretty sure it's the same map that I came up with. I had Kamala winning every swing state. She included Iowa and she included Iowa. I don't know if I included Iowa. Maybe I did. I don't really remember. But she was on that hopium kick. She was definitely like pro walls, like she was like pretty good, I think, like all things considered. Coming from that kind of space online, she was pretty good. It's really just it's just her recent takes. I think she's gotten worse.
Where are you at on the latest here?
Well, it's amazing how much of a self-inflicted wound this was. It felt like Trump could put Kash Patel, the podcaster, in charge of the FBI and thought that he could lead his supporters around like sheep and that they wouldn't be able to understand what's happening here. But this is a major problem for him, in part because so much of his brand has been built on the idea that he is in some way outside of the Republican Party, that he is a break things kind of guy. MAGA is separate from the traditional Republicans that people hate. Like, you look at the favorability for the Republicans and the Democrats, and it's quite dire. But when you have candidates, even like a Zoran Mamdani, who is eschewed by the establishment of the Democratic Party, in this current environment, that is something that elevates you. Why this hurts Trump is it makes
Hold on.
Makes him a part of the elites that he always was a part of, but he branded himself as different from that.
I don't know how this is going to land with the chat, but when I look at how Mamdani has been treated by the party, by like the broader Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party, I actually see someone who is more accepted than his more progressive Democratic social adjacent predecessors. You have the Democrats posting a celebration video on their Twitter account the night after the election, and he was prominently featured. When I look at the way that the party's treating Mamdani, you can see there are some people that are expressing concerns about him. There are some people that are speaking dismissively about him. I think Fetterman has kind of badmouthed him a bit. Spanberger kind of took like a not so subtle jab at him. Schumer, I don't know if Schumer has like badmouthed him, but Schumer has gone out of his way to, distance himself from Mamdani. All that is true and all of that is valid. And I don't think I think you can express your differences of opinion with Mamdani without dismissing him. And so I actually don't care that Spanberger maybe doesn't like his politics. That doesn't matter to me at all. But you can sort of, you don't have to be dismissive of him or his voters. But even with all that, I see a party that's kind of extraordinarily welcoming him into the fold. You have moderate House Speaker Jeffries, who, it was a tepid endorsement, but an endorsement nonetheless. That's pretty significant. The DNC embraces him. That's true. The DNC has seemingly embraced him. And so I actually see that as progress in terms of the left flank being kind of welcomed into the fold. It's not like 100% yet, and maybe it never will be, but it's, better vibes for sure than 2016, right?
And so now he is a part of the cover-up, the elite cover-up that they were always speaking about amongst the base.
Really is like extraordinary. They drummed up a bunch of conspiratorial scandal. They were reading codes into Democratic emails to create Pizzagate. You had all of these Republicans,
Wayfair,
running to expose this elite pedophilia ring. Now you have the White House bringing Lauren Boebert in to try to convince her to oppose this. She walks away thinking the conspiracy
in the Situation Room.
In the Situation Room, yes.
Which means like that is very classified stuff that they're saying you would know.
or like to make it seem more legitimate, but like anybody, she walks away more convinced than ever that there's something going on here. Then we see emails that are being released where Trump and Epstein clearly had a relationship that went well beyond when he claimed it was over. It also exposes that Todd Blanche's interview of Ghislaine Maxwell was either deliberately meant to obscure their relationship, or he was not able or didn't want to know more about their relationship. Just today, just before we recorded this, so George Conway, one time Bill Clinton impeachment lawyer, noted this, that it sure seems like Todd Blanche was either a willing or an unwilling accomplice in Ghislaine's efforts to undercut or kind of underplay Trump's relationship. And he's pretty defensive about this, saying, well, we didn't have the information. DOJ just didn't have all this information. Well, why not? Right? Like, why are you acting like a defense attorney for Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell as opposed to a prosecutor trying to get to the truth about all this?
Well, I mean, was Trump's personal attorney like yesterday, so
Yeah.
I think like we can see how this Justice Department operates. It's incredibly naked, but because Republicans control both chambers, they allow them to get away with just broad illegalities. But about the Epstein issue, I do think that seeing these Republican defections and however many end up voting now that the discharge petition has enough signatures is going to be indicative of how weak Trump is, especially after this last round of elections, which I'm not sure if you can remember an election cycle in an off year that was this partisan, that was this aggressive in pushing back against the actions of one party, whether it's Zoran Mamdani as a Democratic Socialist in New York, or when you have Spanberger and Sherrill and the results even in Seattle, what we're seeing too. So the fact that you have Republicans that are going to defect here, you can see that his authoritarian grip on the party, or his bullying, the fact that he tries to use primary challenges with his backing as a threat against these people if they go against him, that's falling on deaf ears now. And that, I think, says a lot more about where Trump is than anything else.
Yeah, I think it was Thomas.
Based, correct, true. Trump is losing his grip, I think. Very slowly losing his grip. He could rebound, I suppose. There's a universe where he can rebound. I don't know, maybe he sends out the $2,000 stimmy checks, tariff stimmy checks, and maybe his numbers go up a little bit, but like he's losing his grip. Like they ignored him when he was pressuring them about the filibuster. They're obviously ignoring him about this Epstein vote. And I think probably at this point, a lot of Republicans in the Congress can see where the wind is blowing, and it's not great.
Massey, who made the point that there will be a time when Trump is gone and we will have to live with this vote. It is startling how fast we went from is Trump going to refuse to leave office to Trump really feeling like a lame duck. He is not able to cajole the caucus into avoiding this vote. You have people jockeying for position in a post-Trump Republican party. You have leaks from the White House saying the president's got to tour the country to tout his economic agenda. He's cloistered in the White House. Just like real lame duck shit, which is pretty amazing. You brought up the election. So we had these 5 blissful days between across-the-board victories in New Jersey, Virginia, New York City, elsewhere, public commissioners races. We always knew and cared about public commissioner races in Georgia, Supreme Court races in Pennsylvania, a few other big races. And then that led into the 8 defections that led to the end of the shutdown and a lot of recriminations about Schumer, which felt all the more galling to people because we just got a signal from voters that they were certainly not penalizing Democrats for picking this fight. Where are you at on the Schumer of it all?
I mean, I think he's a dead man walking, I would imagine. And I would, if I were able to have the Democratic Party listen to me, I would say that there should be a vote on leadership tomorrow. I mean, this is the kind of action that creates such a fissure with the base, where the base is screaming for fight. The broader electorate is screaming for fight, as we saw in those results. And the fact that basically all they got was a promise on a vote for the extension of ACA subsidies. And we're going to see people.
I mean, I agree with her on Schumer, but I disagree on like, the Democrats aren't fighting right now? What are we even talking about? Like, I'm seeing fight everywhere. The longest government shutdown in history, that's not fighting because we didn't get the concession that was probably never on the table to begin with. That wasn't fighting. A 5 week, the longest government shutdown ever. Well, that was not a fight. Like, look at these numbers, because as somebody who is somewhat defensive of the decision to end the shutdown, I think it could have gone on a little bit longer. I think you could have maybe squeezed a little more juice out of that, but I think we were at the point of pretty diminished returns in terms of the political upside of picking that fight. And so then the shutdown ends and people are like, well, we didn't get the concessions. All we got was a promise to vote. What was the point of the shutdown? That's the point of the shutdown. This is one poll. Take it for a grain of salt. Throw it in the averages and go about your day. I'll wait for other polls to see what's what, but this is devastating for Republicans. Who do you blame for healthcare premiums going up? This was a national poll done by Navigator, which is a center-left, I think, pollster, but I think they have a decent reputation as far as I understand. Who do you blame for healthcare premiums going up? 47% of the country blames GOP, 21% blames Democrats. That's a lot of people that are answering, I don't know. That's like nearly a third of the country saying, I don't know. But this is devastating for Republicans because those premiums are going up. Who do you blame for rising costs? GOP by a wide margin. Who do you blame for electricity costs going up? GOP by a wide margin. Guys, these are all issues that affect Americans every day. Maybe less so healthcare. People don't necessarily have like healthcare costs they're dealing with every day, but people do buy goods and services every day. And the vast majority of plurality of the country blames the GOP. People pay their energy bills, once a month. They can see their bills. They blame Democrats by nearly 20 points. People's healthcare premiums are going to spike. Mine are going up 15%. I've talked to some people who theirs is going up over 100%. And by a margin of 26 points, they blame Republicans. The Republicans are walking into a brutal January. And in the absence of real concessions on the tax credits, you at the very least want a pretty significant political win if you're going to shut the government down for 5 weeks. Well, this is pretty significant. That actually matters quite a bit, you guys. NRCC pollster shows massive warning signs for Republicans. For the first time in 2 years, voters whose top priority is inflation and the economy now prefer a generic Democrat for Congress, D+13, over a Republican. This is just a brutal political climate for Republicans right now. I had some people in my chat that were dismissive of the idea of like, well, what was the point of the shutdown? Well, to raise salience and awareness about the issue of the premiums spiking. If you can get out there and signal to the public, this is what the Republicans are letting happen. This is what we're shutting the government down to, or helping to shut the government down to fight for. And they did that for 5 weeks, and it looks like that bore fruit, because I'm not sure these margins would have existed without the shutdown. I don't think it would have been like this. I think it would have been closer to 50-50 here. Are we still thinking we're having real elections in the future? I could somewhat understand that kind of doomer take earlier on in the Trump presidency. I don't know how you could have that take now. Like, he is so politically weak. This is not someone who has the capital to do an authoritarian takeover of the government. This is a wounded animal. We are going to have midterms. He's not going to stop those midterms. He sends in federal poll watchers to blue cities. Great. That, honestly, I promise you, that would boost Democratic turnout. I don't think he can stop what's coming. Like, I just don't. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse for him. Just what is going well for Donald Trump right now? Just one thing. He's getting a ballroom. Okay, great. What else? That's exactly, yeah, lame duck. I mean, that's what they're talking about. I mean, they were just talking about this a moment ago. It's just, I have noticed the conversation has kind of changed, especially since that last election, last Tuesday. We went from having like, I don't know, are we going to have midterms, or is he going to run for a third term? And I wouldn't worry about it too much, guys. He's not doing great. Like, if Donald Trump was sitting at like 55% approval right now, then I think I would be right there with you, dooming a bit. Or God forbid if he was up at like 60% or something. But if he was above water, if he was like 52%, 53, 55%, then I would be with you guys like, fuck, I don't know. Not looking great. But he has plummeted like 40, 50 points with independents. He has completely reversed the gains that he made with Hispanic voters. He has totally reversed the gains that he made with young voters. Like, Gen Z are very disgusted by Trump at this point. In my opinion, I think we're watching like a dead man walking. Like, I just think he's so diminished. But you seem to want the Dems to play it like he's at 55%. At least that's the impression that I get from all this caution. Are you talking about Plattner right now? Is that what you're talking about? I think the reason I'm caution about Graham Plattner is because he had a literal Nazi tattoo and hasn't submitted his financial history report. It was due 8 weeks ago. And for some reason, he still hasn't submitted that. And he's hemorrhaging senior staff. And apparently his wife is on the payroll, and there's some sketchy shit possibly about like paying her instead of him so he can still get disability checks. Like, he's just there was something else that came out just today. Like, I don't know how many warning signs need to flash about Plattner before people understand that this guy is probably not the best guy to run against Susan Collins. But everybody has their own process with these things. And if the voters of Maine choose him, not my state, so
People's premiums double, triple, skyrocket. What they're going to go through with this amount of pain, and the fact that Democrats signed on to that, and there was some reporting that I had seen, I believe, from Corey Robin about how many of those Democrats were more concerned that the filibuster would be done away with, and that was what they were concerned about protecting, because Trump was basically telling the Republicans, and I think Republican leadership also wants to preserve the filibuster because it benefits them disproportionately. Under Biden, there was a period where there were 50 Democratic senators, or 2 independents that caucused with the Democrats, and 50 Republicans, and the 50 Democrats represented 40 million more people than the 50 Republicans. So you can already see the Senate as an undemocratic institution in and of itself, the fact that Montana has 2 senators and California has 2 senators. On top of that, the filibuster is another kind of undemocratic obstacle that creates the center of the Republican and the Democratic Party, or puts them in a position to eschew the left or right flank and not participate in the more direct version of democracy already. And so I think Thune and Schumer, who didn't vote for it, but clearly his fingerprints are all over this, and he was involved in these negotiations, they were more concerned with the preservation of those anti-democratic guardrails. And so why I get so frustrated about this is that
I don't know. Vishy, Das Vidania, was there any reporting that the filibuster was a serious consideration for the senators who voted to fund the government? I just don't see it. I think this is being massively overstated. I don't think there was any real risk of the filibuster going away. I really doubt that the Democratic senators felt like that was at risk. I just don't think it had anything to do with the filibuster. I think it was literally they just wanted snap to resume, and they knew that if the government stayed shut down for much longer, I don't know, I'm not an expert on like the civic structure of the federal government and all these agencies or whatever, but I suspect that, you know, you can kind of get away from doing you can kind of get away with doing a government shutdown for a little bit, but I assume that there's a point where it just like falls off of a cliff and the wheels just totally fall off. I assume the SNAP payments were I would assume probably the biggest consideration. Zondo said if Trump demands it, it's fully at risk. He was demanding it, and they did not budge. Everybody talks about how, look at Trump, he's so good at whipping votes. Trump gets whatever he wants. Well, clearly not. I'll just put this up on the screen. I put it up a few times in streams in the last week, but the Washington Examiner, right-wing magazine, this was after Democrats demolished Republicans last Tuesday. They reached out to every Republican senator and asked them where they stood on the filibuster. 11 didn't give an answer. 8 just didn't respond. I have to assume that the vast majority of both of these groups were people that just didn't want to piss Trump off by taking a firm position. Only 10 Republican senators out of a caucus of 53 told Washington Examiner that they were open to getting rid of the filibuster to pass the budget. And then 24 Republican senators were willing to go on the record in saying no. My answer is no. That to me tells you that they were not even close to getting rid of the filibuster. Vishy, what'd you say, Vishy? Zondo is incorrect. Look at Epstein. Oh yeah, that's the other thing too. Trump is trying to demand that they don't release the Epstein stuff, and they're obviously going to rebuke him on that. I just don't think the filibuster was a consideration. I think that's nonsense.
Why did the message about democracy fall on deaf ears in 2024? How could it possibly have after January 6th? And I think
get in there and make it about Gaza. Here it comes.
One, people's material reality right now, what they're experiencing with so-called democracy, is not good. So it's hard to sell the structure when people's material conditions aren't being met. But I think the broader problem is, and you guys were all over this on the show, with Biden, was the lack of democratic responsiveness internally with the party to their own base, right? When you have only 8% of Democrats
I'm actually surprised she didn't.
approving of Israel's military action in Gaza, over 70% saying it's a genocide in terms of voters, let alone independents. 25% only approve of Israel's military action in Gaza, per that, I believe, a Pew or Gallup poll from a few months ago. But also the base was saying Biden's too old. We want something.
That one Ta-Nehisi Coates quote just pisses me off. I hate that quote. He's like, you know, how can we trust the Democrats to, he was saying, you know, Democrats were running on protecting democracy. And he said something to the effect of, how can we trust that the Democrats will save democracy when they won't even act on genocide or something? I can't remember exactly how he said it. Just feels like one of those sound bites that means like fucking nothing. One is a war, brutal and horrific and deadly military campaign, 3,000 miles over there. And then, you know, and then we have like Donald Trump running. I just felt like those things, I was just like, I don't understand the point. I really don't understand how he's connecting those things.
process where some of these issues were able to be hashed out and the public.
Like, did he literally think, like, I can't trust that Democrats will preserve democracy? Did he really think that because of our foreign policy in Israel? There's no way he actually thought that. So it's just such an empty soundbite to me.
Was brought into a discourse that shows democracy. Democracy isn't just showing up at the midterms and in general elections or in primaries. There has to be a democratic responsiveness to the base. And I think Schumer really does not recognize that that should be his role.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think like that is, I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think there's some problems with it. Like, I have the same instinct, right? Like, that's
right.
The direction I want. That feels sort of the thrust of it feels correct. But then you say, well, hold on. There have been times in which the American economy was far worse, and you didn't see this sort of rattling against the cage of democracy itself, or a lack of faith in democracy itself. There's another part of the filibuster too, which is, like, I don't think Republicans are defending the filibuster because they're worried about what Democrats will do when it's gone. I think that's what maybe they tell themselves. But I think a few of these Republicans are well aware that if the filibuster goes, suddenly they don't get to blame Democrats for intransigence in the Senate.
Oh, I agree
suddenly
with
they have
that
to
too.
own
Yeah.
the Republican agenda, which leads me to think, well, if we're going to get rid of this thing anyway, let's have them do it.
Right.
Of course. But let's take... It is important for the argument against Schumer that his fingerprints were all over this deal. Mm-hmm. And I think that is because people want to hold Schumer responsible for the ways in which they are disappointed in the outcome of the shutdown, when really their critique of Schumer is not about this specific event, but about the weakness of his leadership going into the shutdown, right? That he is so buffeted by the different wings of the party and has so little kind of deeper loyalty with any segment of the party that he can't tell us who he voted for in the election, that he has to vote no on this deal when people think probably he was behind the scenes aware that it was happening. But what if he really did? Like, what if what is actually happening here is Chuck Schumer, the majority of his caucus never wavered, right? They wanted to do a shutdown over a range of issues. They chose healthcare because they thought it was an issue in which there might be some way to get some kind of a victory. And
I think politics is just so present in this vote. I genuinely believe, I don't know what the number is, but I genuinely believe that at least like 12 to 20 other Democrats in the Senate wanted the shutdown to end. And we're happy to let that 8 kind of fall on the sword. Maybe even more than that. Like, this is something that is driven by politics. Pritzker's statement coming out and condemning it, and Newsom's statement coming out and condemning the vote to fund the government. I think that was all politics too. Clearly, Newsom, his strategy going into 2028, and pretty fucking obvious that he's running. He is looking at the polls. He is getting a sense of where the Democratic voter base is. Everybody can see that the Democratic voter base is really fired up, and they want the party to fight Donald Trump at every step of the way. I'm a bit out of step with the Democratic Party. You see, guys, politics is it's kind of like a game of chess. Let me explain. I said I was done with political analogies, but I will always bust out a chess analogy if I can. In chess, you guys, sometimes when you evaluate the position, like before you make any move, this is what any chess player will tell you. Before you make any move, you need to look at the board and you need to evaluate your position. And sometimes you might have a couple minor pieces that are in somewhat close proximity to the enemy king, and you might be tempted to just start attacking right away. But if you stop and you evaluate the board and you evaluate your position, you might come to the conclusion, I need probably 1 or 2 more pieces in this fight if I'm going to make a serious attack and try to go for a checkmate or something like that. You have to consider your position. And I think a lot of Democrats right now are smart enough to do that, but they're also politically savvy enough to know, especially ones like Newsom that have aspirations of higher office. Pritzker seems look like he's somewhat interested in maybe hopping in that race. Shapiro's kind of showing signs. I think there's a decent chance that Newsom agreed with those senators who voted to open the government, but put that tweet out anyways, calling it pathetic, because he knew that that would politically benefit him because the base is just, they want fight, 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 fight. And, you know, that's just politics. But in this analogy, we aren't even agreeing on the positioning on the board. You and me, maybe we disagree, because when I look at the Democratic position right now, boy, is that a strong position. Does anybody disagree that the Democratic Party position right now is the strongest that it's been since, do we go all the way back to 2008? I think we're in a stronger position now than certainly we were in 2016. I think we're in a stronger position now than we were in 2018. I think we're in a stronger position now than we were in 2020. I think you'd have to go back to 2008. Now, 2008, it was stronger for the Democrats. So I'm not saying we're 2008 levels, but forget about the public approval. Forget about the approval numbers for the Democratic Party. I realize that there's a lot of dissatisfaction within the party with party leadership, and they can't ignore that. I do hope that Schumer steps down, because I think that would be a big morale boost. But this is the strongest that the party has, the strongest position, if we're looking at it like a chessboard. And I think the decision by those 8 Democratic senators to open the government, that was like a prophylactic move. We call that a prophylactic move in chess, where you don't necessarily attack, you just make a move to subtly improve your position. And then you know that if you do that enough, if you just kind of subtly improve your position, you make an attack much, much easier down the line. I think they're going to have a really strong attack against Republicans in January. That's going to be a strong attack. Dazvidani with $5 says, I'm convinced the backsliding is being driven by the media. Not that it isn't real, but that people's lack of trust in institution is from media hyperbole. I think that's a part of it, but I honestly think alternative media is doing way more. In my opinion, alternative media is doing way more to erode people's faith in institutions than legacy media. But legacy media is still, they're always trying to make it about like division, and they want every race to be a horse race because it generates clicks and attention and views and viewership. And so they're not great with how they frame things. And I think the media is largely responsible for the insane double standard that exists in this country. Donald Trump is graded on this insane curve in a way that no other politician is. I used to be in a pool league, and sometimes the smart move isn't trying to make a shot you don't have of making. It's setting up your next shot and making it harder for your opponent to win. Yes! Yes. It's a very similar analogy to chess. Any chess player that just like attack, you sacrifice material, you sacrifice tempo, sacrifice king safety, you sacrifice pawn structure, you sacrifice central control. Like if all you're doing is attacking, it may feel cathartic or it may feel good, but just horrible chess. Like in chess, you do have to improve your position. It's not about attacking every opportunity you can get. Sometimes you have to make defensive moves. You have to address your opponent's move. And you just make the best decision that you can on each move. And then if there's some kind of vulnerability that pops up because your opponent overextended themselves, then maybe you can get an advantage in all kinds of different ways in chess. And I think it's the same in politics. And I think like right now, the Democrats are out of power. And so you do have to be like pretty careful because you don't have any power. Is it your position that if the government shutdown had continued, it would have ended up hurting Democrats more than conservative in terms of a chess match? I do think that if it would have gone on, like, think about it this way, okay? So there was massive disruptions at the airports, right? Flights were being canceled. There were individual airports where air traffic controllers just weren't showing up to work because they weren't getting paid. There were significant delays. You were starting to see viral videos of pilots, you know, getting on the mic and talking to the plane and talking about how disruptive things had become. That was, as I understand it, last week, that was 2% reduction in air traffic. Next week, it was projected if the shutdown would have gone on longer, that's 10%. And then the week after that, that's 20%. And so like things were still relatively functional during the shutdown, but we were reaching the point where just the wheels totally fall off. Emergency funds run out. 0 WIC payments are going out. 0 SNAP payments are going out. 0 like federal assistance, not 0, but like a lot of the federal assistance programs. That's a level of pain that would have far eclipsed the pain and shock that happened in the last 5 weeks. You would just like fall off of a fucking cliff eventually. And at that point, I do think that you run the risk of the broad electorate just blaming both parties and being like, I don't care, just fucking figure it out. This shit sucks. I had to miss my flight to go visit my mom at Thanksgiving or something. Like, I do think that I think like the Democrats probably cashed out like right around kind of the peak of what they could have extracted politically from this fight. And I cannot stress enough the value of this. There's so much value to this, you guys. Does everybody agree? To me, this is significant value. This is about to be, the healthcare premiums is about to be the most salient issue for voters in January. And then as the year goes on, people get used to the new premiums. The initial shock of the increase goes away. They're still mad about it, but it's not like, but this is going to be the most salient issue in January. You're about to see so many angry Facebook posts. This shit is going to go ham on Facebook. Your Uncle Trudy or your Aunt Trudy is going to be posting about like, what the fuck? I just got the bill and now plus 26 by a margin of plus 26. People will be rightfully, I should add, people will rightfully blame the Republicans for these healthcare premiums going up. That is catastrophic for Republicans. That is horrible politically for Republicans. And I don't think you would have had these numbers without that shutdown. Really doubtful. Like half of you guys, when I polled you guys, half of you guys didn't know about the tax credits expiring until the shutdown happened. Me too, by the way. I knew about the Medicaid cuts. I didn't know about the tax credits expiring. And it was the shutdown that got me to become aware of that.
And then he goes in, he's already lost a couple members before it's even begun. Yeah. And he, like, if what happened, right, is he did not have the ability to cajole 5 or 6 from joining the 3 that were already against this from the outset, is that an example of your thesis, or is that something more ordinary in which really there's thin margins and he was going to lose people anyway? And really, you don't like Schumer for a variety of reasons.
Absolutely.
And you kind of want to hold him responsible for this when maybe he's not.
You know what? I think there is value. I'm just going to say it. I think there is value to inviting these people to have conversations on PodSave. You never really see these kind of takes challenged from a left-wing perspective. These things become like heterodox. These claims get made, these really big, bold, general claims get made about the Democratic Party all the time in lefty media, and there's never like a Jon Lovett in the room to push back. They're either debating MAGA, but they never, you never really see, maybe I'm off the mark on this one, but I feel like I don't really see Emma Vigeland debating more moderate Democrats. I wouldn't even call him moderate. I think he's very clearly super progressive, but I think there is value in this kind of conversation.
Well, I mean, I think that it would be naive to think that the Senate leader of the Democrats was not across this, and there has been reporting that he was in contact with this gang of folks daily. And yeah, I think our issues with him also go back, or my issues with him and the left's broadly go back to the spring, when I think that their leverage could have been stronger than doing this in the fall. Now,
come on, what? There's no way she believes that. You think we had more? You think Democrats had more leverage to do a shutdown in March? What? What is that based on? What could that possibly be based on? Trump's numbers were way higher. The Republican Party's numbers were way higher. We were still kind of freshly off of an election loss. Like Donald Trump had just been inaugurated like a month and a half prior, and we had more leverage back then than now. What the fuck is that based on?
His theory about Trump's unpopularity is true, but I think you could have also sped run that in the spring.
It's interesting though, right? It is interesting that there was some truth.
Well, of course, but that.
Oh. Does John agree with me? I think Chucky Boy was fucking vindicated.
That's because of the nature of Trump's actions, in my view, more than the Democrats and their responsiveness to it,
right.
But or lack thereof. But I mean, the fact that he couldn't guarantee, I think, an ACA subsidy extension with this deal is a major failure. A promise on a future vote means very little. I mean, Mike Johnson is already
Emma, what do you do if the party that you're supposed to be negotiating with stonewalls you for 5 weeks? Like, what do you do? There's a theory in politics that I want to tell you guys about, but I'll just link that article right there. Is it a failure? It's a failure in the same sense that, like, if you challenged me to punch through a steel wall and I punched it for 5 weeks, didn't even make a dent, like, yeah, that's a failure, I guess, but...
Essentially saying that they're not going to work with them on this. And this means...
Oh, okay, hold on. So... wait,
with
what?
this deal is a major failure. A promise on a future vote means very little. I mean, Mike Johnson is already essentially saying that they're not going to work with them on this. And this means that...
And yet you think that we would have been able to extract concessions on the tax credits? We can't even get a vote on the House floor, and you think we would have got real concessions on the tax credits? That feels contradictory.
This is materially going to impact people's lives. Now, overall, do I think that it's probably better for the health of the Democratic Party that these people, this gang of I forget the exact number, but they're all, by the way, not up until 2028 at earliest or retiring.
Right.
That they are showing themselves to be more interested in the maintenance of a system that doesn't seem to be working for people than they are in fundamentally changing things, because it's not good for their political future, I think, with the where the base is at.
Hold on, sorry.
But they're all, by the way, not up until 2028 at earliest or retiring.
Right.
That they are showing themselves to be more interested in the maintenance of a system that doesn't seem to be working for people than they are in fundamentally changing things, because it's not good for their political future, I think, with the where the base is at right now. So I have a variety of different problems with Schumer.
I mean, people talk about wanting change in the abstract. Like, there's a lot of voters right now that are communicating that they want things to change in this country. You know, most people feel like we're on the wrong track. For the first time ever in American history, younger generations do not feel confident that they're going to have a better life than their parents. Pretty significant, because a big part of American DNA was just unbridled optimism for many decades. But when you start getting into the specifics, when you start proposing actual policy changes, it's pretty clear that most of the country, they don't want like profound fundamental change. You know, many do, but most don't.
Schumer, where I think that he acts more as a concierge than as somebody who is a fighter.
People want more spending power, is what it comes down to. Younger people want homes to be more affordable. For the most part, people are not asking to seize the means of production. They just want like a raise, or they want their dollar to go further. Most people are not looking for like handouts. Most people want to work and feel productive and feel pride in the things that they do.
And that is not something that is going to meet the moment with the severity of what we're seeing here. The other thing that he should have been fighting on is the concept of rescissions. The fundamental structure of the body of Congress is at risk right now, because the Trump administration is essentially functionally saying, yeah, Congress has the power of the purse, sure, but we're going to decide pocket rescissions, where we're going to spend this money, even though that is literally not our role constitutionally. So beyond the material impacts on people with the ACA subsidies, the Democrats that gang of Democrats in the Senate helped participate in neutering their own body in an unconstitutional manner.
Yeah, I'll go further too in claiming that as part of the deal, undoing illegal layoffs and guaranteeing SNAP, because Trump was withholding the money when the contingency funds were there, is allowing Trump's extra legal abuses of authority.
There was also something in the CR that like banned hemp. That's been crazy disruptive. Somebody snuck that in there, that they banned hemp products. Now I'm about to give you a hot take. I don't know if this is the correct move. I'm gonna chicken out and not like stake a firm position on that. But what I will say is it's kind of crazy that like back when I was still smoking weed and getting high, I would buy Delta 8 products. Those for sure got me high. I'm just saying. I would puff on my little like Delta 8 thing. Like the first time I tried it, I was expecting something like CBD, and nope, that shit got me high. Like, that for sure got me high. That is kind of crazy that we were just like kind of selling that shit unregulated. You could just walk into a gas station and buy, you know, like a Delta 8 pen, and it would get you high. What is he talking about? I'm not a crackhead. Delta 8 is like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like technically a different chemical composition than, you know, the kind of THC that gets you high and marijuana products, like a slightly different chemical composition or some such. And because it was a different chemical composition, you could sell it unregulated. So, you could find Delta 8 products like little vape pens in gas stations and these kinds of things. Like normally with any kind of substance that like gets you high, there's like a regulation. There's like some kind of regulating. Delta 8 is like milder for sure. Like if you take a fat rip of like actual like cannabis, then you take a fat rip of Delta 8, like cannabis is going to get you more high, but Delta 8 gets you high. That shit gets you high, man. Anyways, I think they just banned those with the CR. Once that passes, it's going to be banned. It's going to be more regulated. I don't know. I feel like that's probably, I'm a little bit surprised it took that long. Cause that felt like a crazy loophole.
Outside of institutional power to make him more powerful inside of these institutions, which is, I think, the most dangerous thing you can do with someone who is trying to agglomerate authoritarian control of a government, but which again, like some of this always just to me boils down to communication, right? Because no one has done a worse, like the group of senators who made this deal have communicated it so fucking poorly and like made me sort of so angry about their logic, because their logic was really against any kind of shutdown whatsoever. Like, there's going to be pain. So that was always what a leverage was in a shutdown. And you have someone like Tim Kaine saying, well, I didn't know what to say. I had to look the Capitol Police in the eye, and I had to look somebody who wasn't getting snapped in the eye. And I think that's real. I understand the human pain, like sort of the humane feeling of that. But presumably you understand that these people can hear an argument, right? Like
right.
We're not children, right? Like you can explain to us, even like Schumer, like explain this to us. That they're sort of in an older world where they're kind of still messaging like they're trying to get a paragraph into a story so that story gets in front of people, when 90% of people aren't paying attention and the 10% are too smart for what you're saying. They're already like the hyper engaged get it, and the people that aren't paying attention aren't going to hear about this. So why not just make an argument to the hyper engaged, who by the way are the people that are going to talk to their families about it, and just say,
be honest, yeah.
Like if Schumer had gone to the microphone and said, I'm against this deal. A few of my caucus members were never for doing the shutdown at all. They thought it was dumb. I think they're wrong. There's a disagreement. I held it together as long as possible, and then it all fell apart. But in the end, I think it's probably good politics for a bunch of Democrats to say they should have kept fighting while the government is open, and we get to refocus, right? Like there's a little bit of like, just level.
They're horrible.
Yeah. This has come up quite a bit on the stream when I kind of talk about when we talk about like political campaigns, for example. Should the next Democratic president be honest with their pitch? I would prefer that, but I don't think the broader electorate finds that inspiring. I don't think pragmatism is very inspiring, especially if it's like a change climate, it's like another change election, and you get up there and you're like, well, we should temper our expectations a bit, I don't know if we can do that policy. Doesn't seem like we have the votes. I would like that honesty, but I just don't think it's smart political strategy. I do wish the Democratic Party was more transparent and just honest about the political calculations of any given situation and just speak very plainly. I think there was a way to communicate about the end of this shutdown that maybe wouldn't have made people in the base that wanted more fight. Maybe it wouldn't have made them happy, but it could have, I think, landed a little bit better. But I don't know. I feel like most people don't want the truth in politics. They want something that's going to confirm their priors or make them feel good. And this discussion, I think, is relevant to where Mamdani is headed. Like when he is sworn in on day one, he's going to be confronted with the realities that there are serious, probably insurmountable structural barriers for him to execute fully on his agenda. And so how's he going to navigate that? If he isn't able to get any of those things done, if he's not able to get a rent freeze done, if he's not able to get fast and free buses done, if he's not able to get free childcare done, if he's not even able to get, store run bodegas done or something, or city run bodegas done. Was he wrong for promising those things? Was that a lie? Was it a lie that Joe Biden ran on a public option? I don't really know. I'll leave that to better political minds, but
At direct messaging. I mean, I think Schumer had what you're saying about a paragraph or the top paragraph or what the headline will be in the New York Times. Like Schumer's across that, sure.
Yeah.
But that is already, it's just engaging with the same voter base, right? You know, Schumer infamously in 2016 said that for every blue collar worker we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we gain
Not the best quote.
two in suburban Philadelphia, basically. Not a direct quote, I'm paraphrasing a little because my brain's a little slow today. But that, you know, strategy has been an abject failure.
Christian, are you still in here in the YouTube chat? I'm so sorry that I missed you. Thank you for the tier 1 membership.
But the Democrats do have a corner on the hyper-educated, college-educated voters. They have that locked down, basically. My question is, and I think people on the left are talking about this a lot, is how do you expand the base? And that is where affordability as the buzzword, I think, is a step in the right direction, a focus on people's material means. But I already saw that Trump's 2024 campaign director had an interview with Politico and said, our new focus is going to be affordability. Yeah. So how do the Democrats create a distinction on that front? And I think that they're going to have to get more specific.
She's not wrong, but I'm sure we're gonna disagree when she gets into the particulars here. Does Vidani with $2? It's why most candidates say they will fight for. Yeah, I think that's preferable. If you say, if you elect me, I promise I will deliver this, 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 and this. That's kind of you're setting yourself up for a little bit of disappointment there. If you elect me, I will fight tirelessly to get these things done. I will just try my hardest.
And when we're talking about the fight oligarchy tour, billionaires, people's class interests, you know, I wrote this down because I just couldn't believe it. There was an analysis I was reading in, gosh, I can't read my own handwriting, but I was reading it in the London School of Economics, and it was, oh, here it is.
All right.
The collective network of America's top 12 billionaires now surpasses $2 trillion. And since 2020, that's an increase of almost 200%. And so, like, when I talk about democracy and it being connected to people's material reality, if people don't have their material needs met via democracy, that cheapens it in their eyes, and it gives rise to a political nihilism that Trump represents, where the only thing that matters, nothing's really changing in my life, so I might as well be entertained by this reality star. And people his base, I think, lives vicariously through him in a way where he says whatever he wants. They know he's lying, but there's a thrill in it for them. And so the fact that we've allowed...
I don't know if Trump's base knows that he's lying. Like his base, his super enthusiastic supporters. I don't think they think he's lying.
The most important part of how we structure our society to turn into this reality show that also has this sadism element in it, with ICE, with the genocide in Gaza. I mean, the darkness that he has overseen, it can't be overstated, means that the only way that we can meet it is, I think, with a lot of what you're saying, with this more direct communication style. We don't need to treat the voters like idiots. Democrats don't need to be afraid of their ideas. They don't need to be afraid to make the case that we're going to materially change your lives. And when I go back to what Zoran did so effectively, is that he never treated those voters like idiots. You see those explainer videos he puts out there about how he wants to achieve things and how things work. That is a way to engage people civically, as opposed to making politics the reality show that benefits Donald Trump. Yeah, because when nothing matters, who wins? The clown.
Yeah, the part of it too, I think, is...
I think it should also be said that I think it is easier for a New York City mayor to get stuff done than a president. Now that might sound a bit silly, but work with me here. I don't mean in totality, because obviously the totality of an American president, they're going to be able to do things that are much more far-reaching, much more impactful. But I mean, if there's an agenda that a mayor wants to execute on, there's going to be less hurdles for them to plow through in many cases. And then maybe in other cases, it's the inverse. But with the president, if you want legislation, you know, you got to contend with like the filibuster. And I don't know if there's like an equivalent to that in local politics. It is just more, you need more political capital, more electoral seats to get stuff done. Harder to forge consensus at the national level.
We really just, the like the opening that was left for Trump and the Republicans to fill when you had Joe Biden being unable to communicate basically at all. We just went through this election, and I think just to your point, and I think a sign to be quite hopeful is, the Trump base is the Trump base, and we have our hyper educated, engaged group of people. Great, we love our resistance. Yep. And cringe is caring too much, and I don't think you can.
Look, I cry on air like once a week, so I've got that locked down.
I have to be it's so funny. I am an easy cry. I cry at the end of everything. I'll cry at the end of an episode of a procedural. But when I talked to Tim Miller and he got me right after the election, I do think his goal was to get me to cry, and it did work. And then of course, that's where it's like there's somebody at on the Fox News Jesse Waters beat that's like, if somebody on Pod Save America cries, we got to get that footage.
They love it when a woman does it too. That's like double for them to see a woman crying. It's really fun.
Sort of the natural state. But
too hysterical.
It's so emotional.
Yeah. Can't trust me.
But we saw that we saw not just a turnout advantage in the midterms, we saw a bunch of people that had voted Trump come back. And I do think.
I think for me, I think I did let out one cry in private after the election. I gave myself 5 minutes to just feel sad, which I did. And then I chose to compartmentalize. It was like in Succession, in the last season of Succession. Wait, I shouldn't say this because it's a massive spoiler. There's a character in Succession that gives herself time to cry, literally schedules time for her to go into an office and then cry for 5 minutes and then finish the day. And that's kind of how I was. Covering that election night live was just devastating, but there's I'm working. So I felt like my job in that moment was to try to find any kind of silver lining and sort of reassure people that this isn't the end of the fight, was essentially kind of where I landed. But I do think it was either that night or the next night where I sat down and I had been kind of compartmentalizing so much that it all just I felt it kind of bubble to the surface a bit, and I just kind of let it out. And then it was just okay.
There's been a lot of what is the future of the Democratic Party? And I wonder if on some level there's a synthesis here of you need a couple things in different measures in different races, but Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill represent a triumph of just good old-fashioned normal politics. They had a set of core issues. They weren't too far left. They assuaged a lot of moderate and sort of independent concerns while kind of putting forward a kind of clean, simple agenda.
Oh, I can feel Emma's blood pressure rising.
Achievable things they could do based on the issues that were on people's minds. And then you look at what happens in New York, and you have someone really captivating a huge group of people with a much more ambitious and bold set of policies and representing kind of different kind and a new kind of politics. And I'm wondering if you see heading into both the midterms and 2028, is there a version of an agenda, a coalition agenda, that would be something that both maybe not Zoran himself, but the base of the excited young people that got behind Zoran, and the other kind of heart of the Democratic Party, which is
Nope. Hope that changes. I hope that changes, but no, I don't think so. I don't think there's a policy agenda that will make both sides happy. I would love to be proved wrong on this one.
The center-left, super pro-democracy, Obama, Hillary, wine mom, more moderate person. Is there an agenda that we could get this whole coalition behind? I
mean, I think I'm more hopeful about that than I've ever been. And that's one of the glimmering, shining beacons of hope I have in this time period, because I've never seen the base so activated. And part of, why I love coming on shows like this is I'm a member of DSA, but I feel like we have so much more in common than what the fissures of 2016 were, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that there has been a broad understanding, and even the role of Elon Musk, right? So in terms of coming together, let me step back about these elections. Cheryl, I was pretty surprised and pleasantly surprised to see how specifically in like the 11th hour of that race, she was really focusing on things. I'm going to declare a state of emergency over the cost of living. I'm going to crack down on corporate landlords. It's not as far as what Zoran is saying.
This is the wrong read. Mikey Sherrill launched her campaign in March of this year, and she called it like Cheryl's affordability agenda or something. Like, she launched her campaign in 20, and she was running on affordability the whole time. But what I think Emma is trying to do here is she's trying to say that she copied Mamdani, and that's why she was so successful. But just to be clear, we were watching Majority Report live that night as the results came in, and Emma was livid. I shit you not. What a glorious night that was. And Emma was livid because they were tuning into like NBC or something like that, and NBC was calling attention to the fact that Mikey Sherrill was appearing to massively overperform, which obviously that is what ended up happening. But early in the night, when the early results came in, the NBC anchors, the news analysts or whatever, the elections analysts, they were pointing out that, wow, she really does seem to be like really massively overperforming. And Emma would jump in and be like, no, she's not. She's just not. Like, her instinct in that moment was to downplay it as much as possible. Daji Vidani with $5. New Jersey candidates have been running on affordability since the 80s. It's an expensive ass state. I think the really important difference between Mikey Sherrill and Mamdani was running on an explicitly populist framework. It was about like the elite and the billionaires and the establishment are all kind of like colluding against you. He didn't run as a radical, but he was definitely populist. Whereas Mikey Sherrill was not populist. She was not framing it like that. She was not framing it like a class war. She was not framing it like the elite are making your life worse. It was just about like a more kind of calm, sober, kind of just like, we need to figure out how to make housing more affordable. Like, it was framed like that. If we put our minds together, we can really we can come up with some solutions here.
But that was influenced, I think, a lot by his rhetoric. And Spanberger, I don't know if you could have cooked up a more advantageous situation for a Democrat in a state where a bunch of federal workers live and the Trump administration just waged all-out war on them and made them lose their jobs. But still immensely exciting. And even, Jay Jones, the fact that those texts being leaked didn't kill that campaign means that and we're seeing this with Graham Plattner too. The voters are like, we don't care. We want fighters. That's it.
Well, there's some conflicting polls about that, but
can I?
Yeah.
I want to let you get to the.
Sure.
We're still in a dependent clause. I hear that. I feel like both Graham Plattner and Jay Jones, like Jay Jones' apology, he got to a more effusive apology. Maybe it wasn't as first. Graham Plattner has been kind of prostrate. Like, he just laid himself out and be like, I didn't know. And people like in politics, of course, you attack apology as being either like kind of fake or kind of obviously there's a motivation. Fine. Okay. Let's go to philosophy and let's go to 101 and be like, is there altruism? Like, they've said the right thing.
Yeah.
Like I remember people would be like, oh, I can't believe Virginia elected someone so shameless as Jay Jones. Like, Jay Jones said, and I quote, I am ashamed, right? Like, there's a little bit too of like, whether you take them at their word or not, either the voters or the people that are making these apologies, I want there to be some like kind of acknowledgement that the Republican antipathy to just saying you're sorry is politically costly.
100%.
Like, it's people say sorry and it works. That's good.
Right. Well, it's actually kind of what they say about the censorious left. Right.
Yeah.
But the left is actually, or liberals are way more interested in like something like restorative justice.
Sometimes.
But no, I'm actually.
I'm with you.
That's been my critique. I mean, I think that we have to.
These people's preferred outcome was Zoran, Fateh, and Wilson. And winning and everyone else losing. They won't say that on these shows, but it's the truth. I'm not going to assume that she wanted the Democratic candidates to win or to lose in New Jersey and Virginia. I don't know. I feel like that's very speculatory and not really based on anything. I doubt that. I doubt that because, again, she was encouraging her audience to vote for Kamala and 2024. And so like, she's not like a fucking tanky. I don't think she's an accelerationist. She is not an accelerationist. But where I'll meet you in the middle is, I think she definitely wanted Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill's margins to be much smaller, and she wanted Mamdani's margins to be much bigger. And then the opposite happened. And I think that bugged them because it fucked with the narrative. And so the way that she copes with that is by accusing Sherrill of stealing Mamdani's thunder and Spanberger of being buoyed by the percentage of federal workers that are in Virginia. So like her instinct even now, after they significantly overperformed, her instinct is to still to like diminish that.
To zoom out, and how I want to zoom out is building the broadest based coalition based on class, right? And then having a variety of different kind of perspectives. Even Dan Osborne in Nebraska, he's not a Democrat, he's running as an independent. He may not share all my same social issues, but he's endorsed by unions. He wants to tax billionaires. Let's bring him in. I mean, from Grand Platte.
I mean, that tells you right there that I think this is why, again, I find her opinions frustrating, but I put her in a significantly different category than Hassan.
To Zoran Mamdani too. These are more populist candidates that I think can bring new energy into the party. But in terms of like what the overall message can be, to get back to your original question, taking away from these races and these significant victories is that affordability is a step in the right direction, but the way that we can concretely define ourselves as totally distinct from the Republicans who are
super far left policy,
about to try to co-opt this, and they're very good at co-opting Democratic messaging, is you alleviate the affordability crisis by taxing billionaires and returning that untold concentration of wealth that is over the Gilded Age levels at this point. And eventually it's going to have to come crashing down, and we will have to have an FDR-style candidate who brings more material impacts for people, is saying we're going to tax billionaires to do that because the Republicans can't do it. And we're going to create trust in social programs again. And that is through civic engagement. That's through treating voters like serious people and not talking down to them, and abandoning some of the liberal censoriousness that we were just critiquing.
Yeah, I do think I'm with you on that, though. I like just to push on it, because I do want to get to the.
Sure, we're dressed alike, but we can disagree.
Yeah, no, I don't like this new thing where like I keep seeing it. I saw it like a few times in the last month. This theory that it was actually the liberals that were pushing like purity language, kind of quote unquote like woke politics. I think that's what she means when she says like censorious. Is she saying like don't forgive people when they say, what does she mean when she says censorious? What is she talking about? She's saying that was coming from like woke resistant slibs, which is just amazing to me because that's not how I remember like peak woke era 2019, 2020. That was most of that, to my recollection, was coming from like the progressives, like the insistence on particular language and kind of the scoldy tone. That's not my sense of things. Was that that was not coming from like moderate liberals. It really does think that it does seem like they're rewriting history about how the Democratic Party came to be viewed as scoldy. They're saying that was actually the resist libs, and they weren't the ones that were doing that. That's not my recollection of things.
No, I don't actually think even we are just like I don't even think it's. I'm actually not even. I'm like. I want to test my own assumptions about this too, because I agree with what you're saying. But the truth is, if you look back for the last several presidential elections, maybe the rates are slightly different. But how to raise money, there's a lot of agreement, right? Elizabeth Warren had a wealth tax. Every Democrat in the last 20 years has ran on higher marginal rates for the top earners in one fashion or another.
Biden ran on higher corporate taxes, higher capital gains taxes. Kamala ran on higher corporate taxes, higher capital gains taxes, higher taxes on the wealthy. That's been a pretty consistent through line for Democratic nominees for as long as I've been alive. And he's right. It's just a matter of the margins. Just how apart are you on where you think the margins should be?
the classic Democratic line is we're going to stop rewarding companies that ship jobs overseas, right? Like we've had that kind of on the supply side for taxes. The challenge, right, has been what is the agenda that unites us on actual social programs. We've had debates about Medicare for all. I think it was Ro Khanna that floated an idea that I do think is going to be a place where Democrats probably land, is something like on the path to single payer, let's get Medicare eligibility to 50 plus, right? Like that to me is something. But on the like the scolding piece of this, I did this. We had CricetCon last week, and I had this great conversation with Hassan Piker and Simone Sanders Townsend and Jessica Tarlov and Tim Miller, and they were really mixing it up. And there was this feeling of, okay, like this is what a coalition has to look like, and sometimes it's going to.
No, I just want to. I'm like Matthew McConaughey at the end of Interstellar, slamming on that fucking bookshelf, just screaming no. Hassan Piker has not given any indication that he is interested in a coalition in the same way that he is. I think Hassan Piker wants a coalition, but he wants a coalition of people that look and sound, I don't know about look, but like sound exactly like him and push the same exact ideas as him. And he has very clearly demonstrated that he is not a reliable member of the coalition. Emma, for as much as she talks shit about Democrats, and I think that is a problem, I just think that she's just so off base on a number of things. I mean, I disagree. I agree with a lot of what she's saying here, but I have plenty of disagreements with her. But she was, she did demonstrate that when the rubber hit the road and it was time to actually vote, like, okay, I think we can reasonably count on her to support the Democratic ticket despite ideological differences. Hassan? No, if you didn't understand and appreciate the threat of Trump in 2024, and if that wasn't enough to motivate you to compromise your ideology and your principles to support a candidate who is, well to your right, that's like you have failed the ultimate test. Because if he's not appreciating the risk of 2024, how the fuck am I supposed to expect that this guy's going to appreciate the risk when it's Vance at the top of the ticket or it's Rubio at the top of the ticket? Like. He just failed. I don't know how much Lovett is like, I don't know how deep he goes with like the Hassan lore. Like, I just have to assume that he doesn't really know like a lot about Hassan besides the fact that he's really popular with young people and controversial. And I don't think he knows like the deep lore. I don't think he knows about like the conversation that Hassan had with like the second thought and and that other guy on the Deprogram podcast where, in that conversation, he was like, social democracy. This was Hassan. Hassan was saying that him pushing social democracy was basically like a stepping stone, not the final boss. Like he was describing social democracy as like a bad thing, which is that is like a tanky take. The communists in Germany despised social democracy more than fascism because they felt like social democracy created a gentler capitalism. They saw social democracy as something that would artificially extend the life of capitalism. Because all of a sudden, the appetite for revolution goes way down if you, for example, establish NHS and give everybody healthcare and just establish like a baseline level of poverty that can be softened quite a bit with social democratic policies. And they thought that was evil. Because in their minds, it strengthened capitalism. And that's kind of how Hassan talks when he's around his fucking tanky idiot friends, at least. And then he goes into liberal spaces and he's like, yeah, I'm all about the coalition. It's like, he's just lying. Or, and this is a possibility, he doesn't really strongly believe in any of this and it's just about the money, And I'm not going to write that off completely as a possibility. I mean, this guy is living a life of fabulous wealth that very few human beings in the totality of human existence have gotten to experience the kind of luxury and decadence that this man has experienced. He's very fortunate in that respect. So, does he actually think that the revolution is possible? Like, does he actually believe in this political project? Or no matter what the answer to that question is, I think he has deluded himself into considering himself like an actual vanguard of revolutionary leftist politics. I think he, for sure, has deluded himself into believing that narrative about his role in like American politics. But it's possible that that is just self-deception. And really, when you get down to the bottom of it, he just likes making a shitload of money. Which, hey, this is America. You want to do that, you can do that.
It'd be pretty tense, but maybe that discomfort is just what we have to live with. And that requires the left of the party to see people like on the center and the center left and even the pro-democracy center right as part of a coalition, which, by the way, I think has happened, right? Like no one was fighting harder to elect Kamala Harris or Biden before her than Bernie Sanders and AOC.
I was advocating for her a lot on my show too.
Yeah.
So yeah. But
then that also requires people that are more moderate to feel comfortable with people like Zoran Mamdani being in the coalition and being less afraid of Republicans. And I don't know how we get there.
Well, that's, I think, part of where, just to bring it back to that race and why it's so significant is it lays bare the hollowness of the vote blue no matter who argument from the old guard of leadership. Because I just am amazed that Chuck Schumer still...
This is so vapid. Vote blue, no matter who, has nothing to do with like national Democrats endorsing a mayoral candidate. They have nothing to do with each other. Vote blue, no matter who, is a broad strategy. You want to stop the Republican Party and you're a voter, voting straight ticket Democrat. It's a recognition of how dangerous the Republican Party is. That's all that is. And I just feel like there's so many contradictions in their critiques and their analyses, because in one breath, people like Emma will talk about, Majority Report covers Trump a lot. They focus on Trump. Probably 85% of their videos are focused on Trump. They still find ways to like throw in jabs at Democrats in there, but so they understand, I think they understand how dangerous Trump is, like how uniquely dangerous Trump is. If you understand how dangerous he is, then you kind of already understand, you're already there in terms of understanding the logic of vote blue no matter who. That has nothing to do with a senator choosing to not endorse any candidate in a mayoral race. These are just, they have nothing to do with each other. New York City was never at risk of a Republican becoming mayor. The D plus 30 city. Mamdani had a double-digit lead fucking the whole time in the polls.
I just am amazed that Chuck Schumer still, after the election, he probably didn't vote for him, and that's probably why he doesn't want to say. He probably voted for Andrew Cuomo, a man compromised by Donald Trump, who is a sexual predator and who has been one of the biggest bullies in politics that I can think of, and who was, we don't know what he did. But the reality is that Zoran Mamdani, at the very least, I think also lifted the tides in other races across the country. This is my argument.
Let her finish? All right, fine.
I have no proof, but just from vibes.
I like that vibes.
In terms of vibes. Well, just a quick aside. You mentioned that a lot of in New Jersey, for example, Union City, which is
and then she just came out and said it. An
80% Latino city, 50-point swing to Cheryl from what Kamala Harris did. So just to say,
something big was happening.
Something big is happening, and that was in Texas. They're redistricting,
and she's saying that's because of Mamdani? Emma, do you think there's any other reason why Hispanic voters would have dramatically moved away from Trump in the last year? Is there anything else going on in the country that maybe contributed to that?
Based on Trump's numbers from 2024, where he made those gains with Latino voters, that might not be the case. If you're gerrymandering and making lighter red districts versus deeper, let's see how that works out for you. I'm curious. Although Blue Texas has been a myth my whole life, so I don't know. But
one day it's only one day it will be true. Once it's true, it was true the whole time.
Right.
Once it happens, it was always true.
Exactly.
It's a myth until it's disproven.
Exactly.
Yep.
I know. We sound like we're end times evangelical preachers here, but eventually we'll be right. But yeah. So what I do think that he did, though, you also saw an increase in gains in really young voters, like 18 to 29.
What did she just say?
Actually, we'll be right. But yeah. So what I do think that he did, though, you also saw an increase in gains in really young voters, like 18 to 29. And I do think that Zoran's popularity online increased engagement for those voters, even if they weren't in New York City. They were more likely to pay attention to their races when they saw this campaign that was viral, that was energetic, that was exciting. Of course, all of what he advocates for is incredibly exciting. Just the idea of public service and giving back, I think, is really important.
If I'm gonna be making bold claims like this, I would at least try to explore that a bit, you know? There's ways that maybe you could sort of like test the veracity of that theory, right? Like you would have to dive into the numbers and there's all kinds of analyses that you could do to try to establish these connections. But like if I look at 2018, for example, in 2018, was there a spike in youth voter turnout for Democrats during the midterms? I'm just going to guess that there was a spike because of Donald Trump. Yes, there was indeed a spike in youth voter turnout in the 2018 midterms, and especially strong support among young voters for the Democratic side. So like we already know that Trump himself is very galvanizing. He galvanizes opposition. He galvanizes the Democratic Party. A lot of young people were totally disgusted with Trump, I think in ways that far eclipsed the kind of disgust that we saw from the older generations, which makes sense, you know? Younger people, typically, they're less jaded, more aspirational, more idealistic, more hopeful. Well, they used to be, I don't know. I feel like they're quite jaded these days. We saw a spike in youth voter turnout during the first Trump term, and we're seeing a spike again this time. And she's saying that Mamdani's race got a lot of young people energized to go vote for like Mikey Sherrill. Maybe on some level, I doubt that this was like a meaningful number of voters.
He engendered that. So I just can't still reckon with the fact that the leader of the Democrats in the Senate chose to reject that energy.
You could if you just looked at the numbers. Like you could if you don't have to like Schumer's decision to not endorse. That's fine. I don't really have a strong opinion. I don't care. I don't think it mattered. I think it was a manufactured issue. Who cares? I don't care that AOC didn't endorse Eric Adams in 2021, and I don't give a fuck that Chuck Schumer didn't endorse Mamdani. Even if you didn't like his decision, you could try to evaluate from a neutral perspective altogether. Like, put aside the shallow, superficial analysis that the reason why Schumer didn't endorse Mamdani is because he's like evil and he doesn't want progress. Like, you can still believe that in a minute here, but just set it to the side for now and just try to look at the situation as holistically as possible and just try to understand, like I know this is going to be really painful, but just put yourself in Schumer's shoes and ask yourself, what are the things that I would be considering? Besides just the fact that he's very obviously ideologically very different from Mamdani. You have the Senate Majority Leader. He is the leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate. So he's representing, he's at the top of the structure that represents the entire country. So when he does stuff, it's different than just like another New York senator doing stuff. When he does stuff, he's representing the entire party. Is it possible that there were way more moderate senators that were privately communicating to him concern about, how Mamdani might make the rest of the party look? And then you can just look at like Mamdani's numbers in New York City. Like he's slightly above 50% in terms of favorability. It's good to have a majority support, but he does not have an overwhelmingly big mandate at all. And then how popular is he in the state of New York? Like he's underwater in the state of New York. So Are you surprised that moderate leader of the Senate Democrats, chose to just abstain from making any kind of endorsement in a divisive race for a divisive candidate? Would that really shock you? Why don't we flip the dynamic? Let's just flip it entirely. What if it was a progressive Senate Majority Leader and it was a similar kind of dynamic, or the same dynamic, but just like inversed? If that was a progressive Senate Majority Leader and it was a race between an insurgent outsider moderate who was running against a progressive, would you be like trying to bully this progressive Senate Majority Leader into endorsing a moderate who won the primary? Of course you wouldn't be doing that. Of course you wouldn't be doing that. So this is not about like the principle of it. You just don't like the politics of it. You just don't like Chuck Schumer's politics. That's all it is. But she's making it this like bigger issue. I
just can't still reckon with the fact that the leader of the Democrats in the Senate chose to reject that energy on grounds of, I don't know, Israel ideology on that front. But God, Chuck Schumer said earlier this year that his job is to keep the left pro-Israel. And as I keep saying, only 8% of Democrats support Israel's military action in Gaza. So if that's your job, dude, you're failing at your real job and you're failing at your fake job.
Yeah, it's the Democratic leadership should be more afraid of losing the young people that were behind Zoran than being painted as pro-Zoran by Republicans.
100%.
That is what I believe. But and if you believe your job, right, is to try to help people understand a more nuanced view of Israel, you're not going to do it by avoiding the reality of
what people are seeing, what
people are feeling, how they've shifted. I talked to Mamdani about this directly, and my problem when he didn't I talked about this with him in both directions, like the ways in which anti-Semitism was used as a cudgel. And by the way, it was like incredibly rich and so cynical. God, Cuomo ran the most cynical race of any political operation in my life.
Deeply racist.
I just have never seen something like that in my, there have been more racist campaigns. We've beaten because there have been,
but really racist, yes, for I don't know, 2024.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, I would say like an extraordinarily bigoted campaign.
Yeah.
But I would say the most cynical campaign I've ever seen in my whole life. And then he had the audacity to say that Mamdani was using Israel as a wedge issue. It's like, no, that's what you did. Yep. That's what you did. You made people think, like, you made this more salient for the voters as if he was running for mayor of Tel Aviv, which was ridiculous. But if your goal is to create a big coalition in America that opposes Israel's military campaign in Gaza, which I think is the right thing to do, to oppose funding Israel's military, one role you have as a leader is to, I think, speak out when parts of your coalition are saying things that could alienate others that would get behind you, not just because I think some of those statements were morally wrong, but because I do think they're politically alienating. And to me, like, what made Zoran such an interesting figure
Ace with $10, Dems and the moderate left don't need progressives like Emma and Hassan. They need to reach the center and even the right. They are too online. Hassan fans aren't the voters they need. It is the opposite. I think there's some truth to that, but again, I don't think we should be putting Emma and Hassan in the same camp.
It is actually the ways in which he was often doing some normal politics and coalition building outside of this issue, right? He's keeping on the police commissioner. He brought in Brad Lander. He did a ton of meetings to assuage people's concerns. He's also, I think, one mistake people made in how they ran against Zoran is they ran against the New York Post covers. Mm-hmm. But he's a much more interesting and smart and curious and thoughtful person, and was able to describe, really in detail, defend a lot of his positions in a way I think people didn't hear. But I do think that speaks to the way we have to kind of come together, because I do think the left ought to be a bit circumspect at times at the work that needs to be done to persuade, right? And that requires, I think, at times compromise, while at the same time I think the center needs to learn from the enthusiasm that this kind of populism engendered. And so the solution is not going to be centrists who sound like populists. I think that helps. I think people do genuinely want that, but that's not enough. But also, being populist and being charismatic and being inspiring to a big group of people that want to see them in their leaders, like that is true. But like, that does not mean you don't have work to do to bring more people along, because those aren't yet majority views.
There's a lot to chew on there. I think, about Zoran's talent as a coalition builder. He has Bernie-style politics, Obama-style charisma, but he has like the city municipal.
Let's rein it in just a little bit. I mean, he's a very charismatic guy, but I think we can rein that in just a little bit.
Political, relationship building thing down that you really need. And love Bernie to death, one of the greatest, the OGs. But, he's a little cantankerous.
I was interviewing him a couple months ago, and midway through the interview, he just leaned back and went, and that hurt. That hurt.
That would break my heart in two.
It wasn't my best moment. I should have got to stop telling that story. That didn't happen.
Sure. Cut it. But no, that sounds exactly like him. And he's done that on air with a bunch of other interviews. So, that is one of Zoran's talents. And I think that is part of, he's a quintessential millennial politician in many ways. Like our generation is really, when you look at polling, the most progressive consistently generation. So in terms of where the left needs to be smarter, I hear you on that. I think part of the problem is that we don't really have any national Democratic politicians who are leading the way on the issue of Israel's genocide in a way that matches the urgency or gives people a rhetorical framework to advocate on this issue. Now, my viewpoint is that Zoran is really the first to do that, where he talked about, when asked, do you believe Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state? He says, I believe it has the right to exist as a state of equal rights. That is my position. I think more Democrats should be speaking in that fashion, meaning one democratic state.
Wildly unpopular take. Why do you think that more Democrats should be speaking like that? I think the easiest way to cut through that bullshit is to just simply point out that the proposition of a single state that would just encompass everything from the West Bank to Gaza, full right of return, like that whole like pipe dream that they keep fucking focusing on for whatever reason, the easiest way that you can just cut right through that, because there's like about 1,000 different ways that you could try to point out that is, number one, not going to happen, but there's 1,000 ways you could poke at that. But the easiest way is to just point out that this proposition is the least popular proposition amongst both Palestinians and Israelis. Neither side want this outcome. They do not want to share a single state. That is very clear when you dive into the numbers. So why are you, as like a Western leftist, so insistent on that outcome? Well, I think it's because they've seen historical examples of, they look at like South Africa. They always do this very, very flawed comparison to South Africa. And I mean, this is flawed for just a number of reasons, but, and so they think like that's the model and it has to be that. But even Nelson Mandela did not push for a one-state solution. I think that should tell you something, because you tell people, well, there's just no way that would work out. There would be way too much violence. There's just, what does that even look like to try to force them to do that? And then what you typically hear is like, well, it would look a lot like South Africa. Well, okay. Well, the leader of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa was not pushing for a one-state solution. He did not think it was workable. That should tell you something, because they see the world as a zero-sum game. They want total victory. Yeah. They're fantasizing about like war tribunals and public hangings of, like Netanyahu, which, that's based on anger. And I think they have a right to be angry, but it's not. It's just totally disconnected from reality. There has never been that type of violence when apartheid has been abolished. I would have to take some time to look into that claim, because I don't know if I want to accept that at face value. But what do you think is gonna happen if you force first of all, who would even force a one state? How would that even happen? That would have to come, I mean, there's international pressure on Israel to, end the bombing and end the military campaign. There was plenty of international pressure to do that. but there was never any real international pressure to do a one-state solution. So there's no international political will to try to force a one-state solution through really punishing sanctions or military intervention. There's how do you even see that as possible? Like, where is that going to come from? Like, but again, just like the most important thing here is like, guys, Israelis don't want this and Palestinians don't want this. They do not want to share a single state. They don't want to do it. So why the insistence on that? That blows my mind. Like, why?
And there needs to be some sort of United Nations commission that comes in, truth and reconciliation, and there's already 700,000 settlers in the West Bank.
Jon Lovett is not dumb. He knows this is all nonsense, so I'm curious to see how he navigates this question.
Bank, illegally occupied by Israel since 1967, as has East Jerusalem been, and Palestinians since that period have been living under a one-state reality. And we have to be beginning to be speaking about the reality on the ground, because the two-state...
It's a one-state solution is wildly unpopular amongst Israelis and Palestinians. It's also wildly unpopular amongst Americans. And I think that's because people obviously understand that there is no way that that's going to work out well. Not going to happen.
Solution fiction is just something that bides time here and still undercuts the idea that multiculturalism is a strength. We can't be making the case in this moment of fascism that racial integration in greater Israel is a threat because this group of people can't be living aside this group of people. And a state that's maintained in terms of ethnic or racial supremacy is not one that should be supported by the Democratic Party, especially when we have a fascist in office.
Yeah, where I'm at.
Again, Lovett is not, he's not dumb. But he's also, I think, being very, very, very diplomatic in this discussion with Emma. And I think the reason, you guys, all these people down here, I think he knows his audience, and so he's being very, very diplomatic. I think in another setting, he would show kind of disdain or contempt, because what she's proposing is fucking ridiculous and just not workable in any realistic way. It's just a complete leftist fantasy. It's like the rapture is what this is, you know, like leftists waiting for a one-state solution with like, you know, truth and reconciliation and, you know, war crimes tribunals. Is like evangelicals waiting for the rapture. That's what it's like.
That is agree with the statement that no state has the right to deny the equal rights of anyone.
Look at him. See, that's a political answer right there.
Who lives within its borders. Full stop.
Okay, I agree that people shouldn't be oppressed. All right, let's find the common ground. I agree that people shouldn't be oppressed. Okay.
And that ought to apply to every country, including Israel. I do think like there's been a move against the two-state solution as fanciful, and I take those arguments.
And they make sense. You know, the West Bank encroachment does complicate a two-state solution. It's true. But it's like as difficult as it is to imagine a two-state solution, it's about 1,000,000 times more difficult to imagine a one-state solution.
At the same time, I think you could make a very good case that a one-state solution is not closer. Like these are both, we are very far from a genuine and lasting and just peace.
I see a two-state solution as a great step to what I'm talking about. And if
I wonder if in his head, like, I feel like he's definitely practicing restraint in this moment.
if it needs to happen as a diplomatic step to give Palestinians more rights, I'm all for it.
Yeah, all I'm at is, look, we can get to the prescriptions from here, but look, ultimately what will happen in that region will be determined by the people in that region, and what we ought to be advocating for is the human worth and dignity of every person, especially when it has been
That's good. That's a political answer right there.
denied to the Palestinians. And like, I don't I just think I find the kind of it almost becomes an intellectual exercise about what the future could look like. Like we ought to have these basic principles, and I agree with you the way that Zoran.
That's all this is. It's just a conversation between intellectuals that is totally removed from reality.
Talks about it. There is a kind of
Friday the 17th of July.
People who describe themselves as being pro-Israel take issue with this, as it feels like a hyper focus on Israel when the equal rights and dignity of many people are denied throughout the region. But then my response to that is, well, we describe Israel as a democracy. We hold it to the standards of a democracy. I would like to continue to do that, right? Like, I to a higher standard than we hold Hamas or the Saudis, right?
Right. I mean, John Kerry said it best. I mean, I think he did say at one point, Israel can either be a Jewish state or it can be a democratic state, but they can't be both.
John Kerry said that? Is that what he said? I mean, there's nuance here. I don't know if I entirely agree with that.
You know, that's really my position on that. I think it's also because the United States, you know, where I wish we could reorient our focus is that to Israel and what it means, of course, in terms of a form of reparations for the victims of the Holocaust, like that cultural memory, we have to be sensitive to that, especially when tensions are so heightened around this, right?
And I would just add to that, I
gotta say, this is probably the most civil discussion that I've heard about Israel-Palestine in the last year, which I think is a good thing. Like, I'm kind of losing my mind a little bit, but I'm kind of glad that he's composed, and I'm happy to see a civil disagreement about Israel-Palestine for the first time in fucking 2 years.
The fact that Jews were expelled from countries throughout the Middle East upon the founding of Israel. And that is like...
Although Avi Shlaim would argue that Zionism is the reason for that more.
I take it back. I want him to go scorched earth. Bro, if you were just like an innocent Jewish person and you had nothing to do with the Nakba, you had nothing to do with the mass displacement of, 800,000 Palestinians, and then the Iraqi government seizes your property, seizes your assets, and then kicks you out of the country, that's just anti-Semitism. You didn't have anything to do with that. You're being kicked out of a country because you're Jewish. That's just textbook anti-Semitism. If that happened with any other group, any other ethnicity, any other religious group, Emma would not have a difficult time understanding. Like, yeah, that's just full-on discrimination. But there's these blind spots for some reason. Dawes Vidani with $5. The full carry quote is, if the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. And it won't ever really be at peace. That does not sound like a resounding endorsement of a one-state solution to me. I think he is saying the opposite in that quote. It almost sounds like she took that quote and then totally twisted the meaning. Her downplaying it is also anti-Semitism. Ugh.
But
Lovett's not going to like that. Please, Lovett. Now's the time. You got to be a little bit more assertive here, Lovett.
To that, especially when tensions are so heightened around this, right?
And I would just add to that, the fact that Jews were expelled from countries throughout the Middle East upon the founding of Israel. And that is like... Although
Avi Shlaim would argue that Zionism is the reason for that more than... But yes, I'm not going to go...
I know. I don't want... I'm not... I just think so. I am just a... there's... I think back to earlier eras in which the left failed to come together to face a rising authoritarian menace, and they were not stupider than us. They were not less aware of the dangers. Maybe in some sense they were, because they hadn't lived through we have access to history that didn't exist yet. But there are genuine and real painful differences that make it hard for people to unite. And I think one way to understand, to get to the other side of that, is to just lay the complicated truth out. That's all.
I'm zooming out to say, basically, in terms of moving forward more broadly, my point is just that...
all I'm saying is that in order for me to be happy with the Democratic Party, all the candidates need to adopt my politics and take positions that are overwhelmingly unpopular. And until that happens, I'm always going to be hostile to the party. That's all I'm asking for. I need everybody to just like be like me and have my politics. And, every day that passes where this doesn't happen is an injustice. So I don't think I'm asking for too much at the end of the day, right?
Some of the crunchiness of the messaging on the left is, in my view, because we're not seeing enough leadership. I love the squad and I love progressive members, but they're still not talking about it in the terms that I just talked about, right? And I think that would help people understand some of the left-wing position a little bit more on this.
I was making a joke, and then she fucking... That is what she's saying, right? Like,
but on the issue more broadly, why I think there's a focus on it, why people get so riled up is, one, just because like it's a genocide, but two, because I think it's a litmus test for a lot of people. They see if you can stand up and be brave on this particular issue, or you go against where a lot of like the blob, or where DC is, or where moneyed interests are, or where the military industrial complex is. People genuinely view that they can trust you. You're seeing moderate members already saying, I'm swearing off AIPAC money, right? Because they see the writing on the wall here. And so I think to build a stronger coalition for Democrats, that is a really shorthanded way to create trust. And it's not just Democrats. As I mentioned those numbers earlier, independents are really, really against this as well. It's like the only positive views of Israel seem to be coming from the Republicans, and it's older Republicans too. And then the younger ones are all actually anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I would say, look, I think the ways in which, I agree with, I think one very good reason to turn away from AIPAC.
Is this the Green Lantern that you speak of? This is what it looks like in reality. No, I don't think this is Green Lantern. This is just echo chamber shit. That's what this is. This is just bubble shit. That's what this is. Emma, her kind of information ecosystem is overwhelmingly leftist, and I think she is projecting the popularity of certain policy proposals. She's just projecting that on everybody else. It's the same reason why she thinks Mamdani is, setting the National Democratic Party on fire with energy. And I think she would do better. She would have better takes if she broadened her information intake. That would be the only way to fix this. But I think she's just in a massive, and it is massive. I think she's in a massive hyper left-wing bubble. And she now has just really incorrect assumptions about, well, frankly, a lot of things.
Money is because it is an organization that has become basically right-wing conservative, and is not a welcoming place for people who have
It's not even that I necessarily want her. I mean, I think she would do well if she listened to a variety of different takes, political takes. So if that includes Ezra Klein, fine, but doesn't have to be him. She should spend more time like talking. I know she debates a lot of people, like with MAGA stuff. They take callers, and I think she needs to spend more time talking to Jon Lovett. That's what I think. I think that would help her. She should have more conversations with Jon Lovett and people like him, I suppose.
Forget a nuanced pro-Israel view, right? Like they're just not. It's become a tool of the right in Israel because it's kind of propped up by a bunch of people that have pretty old-fashioned views and sort of on the subject. But like putting Israel aside as an issue, I agree that it is for some people a kind of a trust marker. Like you talked about a movement that is uniting people around class. I think ultimately, whatever the salience of this specific issue for a subset of people, we are going to win or lose on a broader message that is about the concentration of democratic power and the concentration of economic power. And I feel like as much as we can get that to be the kind of core of what we're talking about, I think the better position we'll be in. I
will say, though, that, I tell this story a lot because I was 14 when Obama was running.
Yeah.
That was where my interest in politics began. I literally became obsessed with Obama, as many young people did, and that campaign. And in particular, it was the primary and Hillary Clinton having voted for the Iraq War previously and supporting it.
That actually makes so much sense, like when you look at her political journey, it makes so much sense. She got interested in Barack Obama in 2008 as a 14-year-old, and then probably subscribed to Green Lantern theory of politics without knowing it. And then Obama comes along, and I think, and I have nothing to prove this off of, I think she was radicalized by Occupy and then became disillusioned with Barack Obama because she believes in Green Lantern theory of politics and thinks that he should have been able to like snap his fingers and give everybody single payer. No, I haven't seen any history of her with Occupy. I'm just guessing that like Occupy was like the beginning of like the radicalizing, and then that really set her on a path with Bernie. Like Bernie coming along in 2016, I think that was like the thing that really informed her political views. It kind of, so that kind of makes sense, you know. Like I come from like the like later Clinton years and the Bush years, was the early Bush years was like my beginning stage of politics. Her kind of political identity was shaped during a time when a lot of people were becoming disillusioned with the Democratic Party, because for a lot of people they thought that Obama represented a much bigger change than what they felt like he promised. And so like the beginning point for her politics is like disappointment with like liberals and, you know, so-called moderates or the establishment. And my political awakening was like George W. Bush invading Iraq and, you know, killing and displacing hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. And then, so it's just like I have a totally different trajectory. This is why, in my opinion, one of the best things that you can do to have like a more informed politics is to just dive into history, like really dive in and try to understand like how we got from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s to the, you know, broadly as a society, and then within the Democratic Party, you know, how has the party evolved? Go back further, go back a century, go back 2 centuries. I'm not really good at like 19th or 18th century history in the US. I have a decent sense of like 20th century US history, but I think if you have that perspective and this kind of, you know, and this also kind of helps to contextualize her claim that the Democratic Party has not moved left. Because if your starting point is Obama, and then all you think of when you think of Obama is like failed promises, I suppose. And then you see Bernie comes along and the media makes it look like it's a much closer race than it actually was. And so maybe she's in her head thinking like, oh my God, Bernie can actually do this, when the reality was he had no fucking path. Then I guess it makes sense that she, from her perspective, we did move right. And you can find a way to make sense of that when you try to like just put yourself in her. Of course, you know, her story is very complex and I'm just massively simplifying something that I know nothing about. I'm just guessing, but I just like, it kind of makes sense when you think about it in that way.
I, as just a young person, I was furious. I couldn't understand how anybody could vote for what we did to hundreds of thousands, killing hundreds of thousands of people in this illegal war. And that was what generated my enthusiasm for politics.
I swear to God, I didn't pre-watch, but if I clocked her on this, I think you guys got to donate $5 to $20 each, because I feel like I earned it. Ooh, come on, please.
And I talked to other people, and many of them, you know, feel the same way. There were other aspects of the Obama campaign, of course, that were incredibly exciting, and how that got so many newer voters engaged is a lesson going forward. So I think a lot of what you're saying is absolutely right in terms of what the base needs to be. But for young people, I do think that this issue has to be addressed more substantively to make sure that we're drawing a distinction, because leaving a vacuum here, we're seeing it already. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeting at AIPAC, I don't want to take your shekels. Yeah. Nick Fuentes is getting folded into the Heritage Foundation. When Zion...
Pump the brakes. Stop handing it to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Stop handing it to Nick Fuentes. I don't know if that's what she's doing, but...
Zionism is conflated with Judaism. We are seeing a very horrifying increase in anti-Jewish hatred across this country. And I think it's incumbent upon us to have a real clear message on this, to not allow these charlatans and bigots and Christian nationalists to fill the void.
And but what I guess we can go back and forth on this. I think that's all quite true. I just think like there is a kind of whatever wouldn't say it as a consensus view, but I would say there's like a median view that would say something along the lines of Israel committed atrocities in Gaza and they should receive not one more dollar for any military aid.
That's easy.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the same time saying we reject anybody that embraces anti-Semitism and anybody who would claim that that not only do Palestinians have a right to live in sort of peace and dignity with equal rights, so do Israelis a right to live in peace and security, right? Like there is all I'm getting at
that's a great baseline. But what you're saying is like a lot of Democrats aren't saying that.
Absolutely.
They're not even ready to cut off funds.
Well, all I'm getting at is I think we're going to have a big primary and we're going to have a big debate. And I think and in the end, what I would like is for there to be kind of
I will Minecraft myself if we get to the 2028 primaries and Israel-Palestine is presented as like the number 2 or 3 issue. I will embrace the sweet nothingness of oblivion. And I just know they're going to do it. Like, I know they're going to try to make that specific issue be like the 3rd or 2nd most salient issue, you know, like I think they'll concede that the economy needs to take priority, but they're going to try to make it like the number 2 issue. And I will jettison myself into outer space on a Jeff Bezos spaceship and just embrace the cold nothingness of space if they fucking try to turn the 2028 primaries into a referendum on fucking Israel. I swear to God.
Like a way to get to that kind of a kind of collective view so that we can focus on what we're going to do to lower healthcare prices, to get more people into Medicare, and to like kind of find a united front. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring us down that rabbit hole
I'm glad
fully,
we did.
but it always goes back to that for me because it's hard. It's a galvanizing issue, I think.
Emma, we could keep talking, but we got to wrap it up. Are there any Epstein conspiracies we should end on? What do you think?
Democrats could be a little bit more conspiratorial. That's my hot take.
You know what? We're all fucking conspiracy theorists now.
Yeah.
Because there was a bunch of conspiracy theories that were like kind of half-baked and bananas, and here we are, and there is a cover-up at the Department of Justice. Donald Trump was president when Epstein died. They've been sitting on all this information for a while. I'll tell you, here's my question. What the fuck was Merrick Garland doing all day?
Oh my
What was
God.
he doing? Walking around with like a candle and a sleeping cap? Like, what the fuck?
Well, not on just this one, but like, I mean, on we should have done what they did in Brazil. We should have prosecuted Donald Trump for trying to do a coup in this country.
We did. Jack Smith literally did. He did it too late. That one's on Merrick Garland, but
I mean, like immediately after.
It's this is something that the left understands that I think the Comeys and Garlands of the world just simply do not, which is they believe legitimacy comes with broad bipartisan acceptance, but that is moral relativism.
Uh-huh.
They've accused the left of being morally relativist forever, and there's a strain of that, whatever. But man, no, legitimacy is something deeper. And just because everyone doesn't tell you that you're right, doesn't mean you aren't doing the right fucking thing.
Well, that is a good way to fold in Epstein, where it's just that it's such a low barrier to entry story for a lot of people, where it just.
I don't know if the Israel-Zionist conversation has such an easy or acceptable answer for these people. No, there isn't. No, absolutely not. Again, I go back to ContraPoints, who I think she made such important and accurate observations of the pro-Palestinian online left. And one of the big problems of their activism was that they made anti-Zionism a mandatory part of their movement. You were not considered to be like a real Palestinian activist unless you were anti-Zionist, which that's just a outdated term. I don't think that term means anything anymore. I don't think Zionist or anti-Zionist, I don't think these things actually mean anything anymore. That term made sense at the end of the 19th century. That term made sense, and maybe for like the bulk of the 20th century, but certainly more like the first like 50 or 60 years, that term made sense. But Israel has been established as a state with borders, with internationally recognized borders for decades now, and there is no unringing that bell. It is a country. It does exist. It's going to continue to exist. So all these debates about should it exist as a Jewish state or should it exist at all, you know, are just masturbatory intellectual exercises for Western leftists with nothing of consequence. For all the debates about Zionism and anti-Zionism that happened over the last couple years in the online space, none of it mattered. None of it mattered. None of that had any impact on what happened, how it played out over the subsequent 2 years. Only someone who doesn't know what modern Zionism is would say what Hutch just said. What is the birth of Zionism? Like what is the genesis of Zionism? It was a desire for Jewish people to have their own state so they could escape horrible persecution in Europe. And that was especially relevant after World War II. You had millions of European Jewish people who, for very good reason, did not feel comfortable or safe in Europe. Obviously, I think the way that it happened, the way that the state was established was not correct. I don't know what the word is. The way that Israel was established was bad. I think we can just say that. But at that time, if I was alive at that time and I was to like weigh in on my opinion, do I think that Jewish people should have their own state so that they can never again have to experience what they just experienced in Europe? I would have told you enthusiastically, yeah, I would want that. If I was them, I would want the same thing. Now, obviously, there are problems if, you know, the way that you make your state is by dispossessing hundreds of thousands of people. But the principle of Zionism, like, yeah, of course. I think at this point, yes. You know, if you put yourself in the mind of someone living in like 1948, you witnessed what happened. And, you know, most of the worst parts of the Holocaust weren't discovered until after the Third Reich fell. There were those unspeakable, unthinkable atrocities were happening for years, and the world didn't even know the extent of it until the Nazis just collapsed. And if you were alive at that time, you would have thought, I'm almost certain you probably would have thought the same thing. Like, well, yeah, I mean, I think they have a good reason to want their own state, right? But we're not in 1948. We're in 2025. Israel has existed for 77 years, 78 years. They have survived multiple invasion attempts. They have a dominant military. They have the means to protect themselves and their borders, and they have the backing of enough international partners where there's no serious risk of them not being a state. So we are past that point. So if you call yourself an anti-Zionist, who gives a shit? That's like, I don't know what would be an analog there. That's like me saying I don't believe in what? I don't even know. I don't believe in America, you know? Like, I don't believe America is a you could say that, right? Like, I don't think America is a legit state. I don't think America has the right to its borders. Okay? I don't give a like, who gives a shit? Again, all those discussions, all they are is just intellectual masturbatory, completely meaningless. It doesn't matter. Who cares? So, you know, I get a little frustrated when because I can see what's happening. I fucking see it, man. I've been telling you about it too. I see what's happening. They're emboldened, and I think in ways that are bringing out like some really horrible political instincts. They saw certain bellwethers. Emma's mindset is she's, you know, after two years of covering what's happening, I think her and her movement, they see an opening that doesn't really exist in the way that they think it does. Like, I think there is an opportunity right now to build political capital or build a movement that can kind of influence things kind of in their direction. It's certainly true that support for Israel is very low in the Democratic Party, and, you know, you can actually pressure politicians to take, you know, positions, but, you know, in her mind, she's like, the ultimate goal is like the one state full right of return, kind of like, she's thinking about it in that way, when the reality is like, you know, we'll probably end up sending like less aid to Israel. is like the best case scenario in the short term. And so, you know, they see these bellwethers like support for Israel really dropping, and Mamdani, you know, winning in New York City as pretty explicit anti-Zionist, and the growth in popularity for populist candidates like Graham Plattner. They're trying to use that to pursue their agenda with respect to Israel. You know, they're gonna center the politics of 2028. They're gonna center the political debate within the party, because you know that's what we're gearing up for. In about 2 years, we're gonna be kicking off an intra-party debate about the future of the party and who the candidate should be. And they're going to make that debate about two things and two things only. It's going to be about, like, you know, affordability. She doesn't like that word, but it's going to be about affordability. And then it's going to be about, like, ending the state of Israel as we know it. Like, and they're going to try to make that, they're going to try to force that issue to the top of the issues. And it is such a hopelessly divided issue that just feels so counterintuitive. Like, of all the issues that we're going to have an intra-party debate about, I can't think of an issue that I want to debate less than that. Because I don't see any good outcomes from trying to force that to be like the number 2 most salient issue. This reminds me of Soy Pill sent me a clip shortly after Mamdani won. It was Chapo Trap House. And one of the guys said that the number one reason why he was so excited about Mamdani's win was that it represented a significant shift in that, you know, now the mayor of a city of 9 million people, I think, right? New York City, is openly anti-Zionist. Like, that was the most important outcome for him. Something that is totally inconsequential with respect to the mayorship of New York City. He wasn't excited about the prospect of maybe free childcare or stronger safety nets for the people that live in New York, more affordable housing. That was not the one thing he said he was most excited for was the fact that an anti-Zionist won in a city that big. And it was like, doesn't that just perfectly encompass how self-destructive their politics are? I swear to God, if the party fucking tears itself to shreds over Israel, Palestine in 2028, and we take our fucking eyes off the ball, just shoot me into space in one of Bezos's like penis rockets, because I just don't have the fortitude to endure that, you know? We have so many problems in this country that we can directly influence. And if we fucking torpedo this party over this fucking issue 2 years from now, and these fucking debates start, bro, I just feel like I don't know, man. I feel like I'm in the movie Don't Look Up, you know? Like, I feel like I'm Jennifer Lawrence in the movie Don't Look Up. Maybe this is me being doomer pilled on this issue, because when I see like the path forward, you know, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as the midterms, but it will be brought up. Like, I feel like when we get to the end of 2027 and the beginning of 2028, when these primary contests first start kicking off and we're doing the debates and just everyone's going to be yapping and yapping and yapping online. And I just feel like it's going to be a disaster, because I listen to their rhetoric. I pay attention to the things that they say. I pay attention to what they're talking about, what they're prioritizing, how they're speaking about issues. And I swear to God, these guys want war. Like, they want a war. And it's like, fucking, did you not learn anything from the Trump years? But that's what I feel like. I feel like there's like this comet in the sky and I can see it, and it's just like coming right at us. I'm like, does anybody else see this comet? You know? And I wonder if Lovett sees it, because I don't think he does. I don't think he sees it. I don't think he sees what I see. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we get there and things are pretty chill, and, you know, we nominate a candidate that everybody can kind of agree that is like idea. Maybe it goes off without a hitch, but fucking doubt it.
Speaks to something where they genuinely feel like there is a different set of rules for elites and what's going on with our lives, and they're not going after people in power. And I really do think that the 21st century, or we could go back to Iran-Contra, really.
I'd rather not. I'd rather talk about like, healthcare. I don't know.
But for decades, there has been a lack of accountability for illegal conduct, the Iraq War, January 6th,
Pardon Nixon.
Iran-Contra, Nixon. Yeah, right.
Bill Clinton lied under oath.
Exactly. And
It happened.
that undercuts people's faith in democracy too, right? When there is a lack of accountability and it builds and builds and builds because powerful people don't want accountability and they know that.
You know what? I actually just like fully endorse what she's saying here. I'm glad we ended it on this because I agree with everything she's saying right now. People have become jaded and disillusioned with politics. It's no wonder that the populist messaging in this movement is so resonant. It's because people have lost faith in accountability. Like, George W. Bush, not accountable whatsoever to just one of the worst things that the U.S. military has ever done. No accountability there. No accountability for Trump after all the shit that he did. In fact, he was rewarded after the fact. Again, he was handed the highest seat of power in the world after he did everything that he did. And on and on and on and on. It's just like, I understand why people felt like the banks weren't held accountable after the financial crash. Israel has not been held accountable for what they've done in Gaza. I mean, it's just like, I understand why people feel jaded. So, I mean, I think everything she's saying here is fine.
That they can get away with more. Why did Menendez commit another crime after getting away with it the first time? It's because that's what criminals do when they get away with things. And we're seeing that level of criminality with Trump right now. And it's an accumulation of decades of powerful people not being held accountable for doing things that are illegal. And I think the American public senses that.
And we have to stop because we've gone on longer than we said. But I will say, I think it's not just allowing powerful people to get away with it. It is also just a kind of celebration of power. I don't think it's a coincidence that as leaders became less and less accountable to the law, we allowed the presidency itself to become more and more powerful, that we kind of equated a president that was willing to do things that used to be Congress's purview with strength, and the law became this kind of fuzzy thing
Instead
that
of
could
buying
only be
20
described by like the Brahmin priesthood. Well, I don't know. Now we're out of time. We got to stop.
I know, but it's been great. It's been
good talking
great.
to you.
It's so great to talk to you. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, me too. Emma Vigeland, thank you so much, and check out.
You know what, man? You know what? I got to say, I've warmed up to it a little bit because, I'm glad that those two talked. I got to say, so I understand. I think they're coming from a place of wanting to strengthen the coalition, the Pod Save guys. And they're in a very unique position where, they have a ton of influence. And I genuinely, and I'm not just saying I genuinely want them to be successful. Like, if they can help bridge the divide a little bit and maybe head off a really ugly 2028, then I support them in their efforts to try to do that. Some people were like, no, you can't invite Hassan to the thing, and you can't invite Emma Vigeland onto your podcast. Like, I don't know. I feel like those are the vibes that I'm getting. I feel like they are genuinely trying to. I think they're smart guys. I think they're strategic guys. I think they are motivated by, a desire to have a good produce a good outcome politically. I don't think they're just grifters in it for the money. And who knows, man? Maybe they can help to blunt the knives a little bit. I'm skeptical. I have to tell you, I'm skeptical, but I support the intention, the goal. I think that is what they're trying to do. And who knows, maybe by engaging with these people more and inviting more dialogue, by the time we get to 2028, it will be, tamer than it would have been without their efforts. So I hope they're successful, and yeah, they should keep doing that. I'm fine with that.